My name is Kimberly, and I have 4 kids ranging from 29 to 26, 21, and 8. So my adult 3 kind of grew up all together, and then as they were sort of aging out, I decided to be a foster parent, and so I got my foster license and I got my very first little foster kiddo and absolutely fell in love with my kid. So I ended up adopting him when he was 2. He's 8 now. And I have actually had foster children that I did not adopt, but this one was special. James is special. So he sort of rounded out a whole new chapter into my family life. I have a little tiny dog named Oslo. I have always had medium-sized dogs or big dogs. This time I got myself an itsy weensy itty bitty little 3-pound teacup Yorkie, and he's full grown. So that keeps my house hopping.
I
Tell me
was
about your
about
family.
Yes,
Well,
I absolutely will. I was about to say I know James and he's absolutely special, but I honestly could say that about all 4 of your children. And
thank you.
yes, I know them and yes, they're very, very special.
Thank
Love
you.
them
I
so
think so
much.
too. And
Yes.
and the thing is too, I didn't ever necessarily need to have kids that changed the world or went to Harvard or, started up tech companies. I want to raise kids that were compassionate, empathetic, kind, thoughtful, um, who give more of themselves than they take from other people. And that's what I got. And then a lot of the accomplishments as well. But they're happy kids, and that's all I could ask for.
It comes from intentional parenting, and I think both of us are very intentional parents.
We are very intentional parents.
So I'm Michelle and the baby sister. We're only 18 months apart, so we're quite close. We've been quite close our whole lives. 2 years apart in school, but otherwise very close in all of our activities and things that we did together. I have 2 kids. One is a 20-year-old daughter, and I have a 12-year-old son, and we live together, the 3 of us in Montreal. I had a special talent for falling in love with terrible men, and I didn't want to raise kids in that environment. So when I reached my 30s, I never really wanted kids. I thought they were a little bit illogical and hard to connect with and hard to understand. And I remember specifically with your second one, when he was about 1 or 2 years old, I was visiting and he was standing on one foot and leaning forward and reaching right just out into the void. There was nothing in front of him. And I said, "What's he doing?" And you said, "He's playing the reaching game." And I filing up bingo, Monopoly. I don't know the reaching game. And then that sort of clicked with me. This is a whole new world. And then years after that, I was making soup on my stove in my beautiful apartment in San Francisco, and it all of a sudden hit me as a wave that I needed to have a kid. And so I did. I had that kid. And then 8 years later, I thought I was done having kids, and I got the first one, actually both of them from an anonymous donor, and I was paying to store that part of the genetic code. And I was also paying to store a bunch of stuff from an old house that I had. And I didn't want that storage unit anymore. And a friend of mine said, "Yeah, let's go. We'll take a truck down there. We'll clean it out." And I thought, this is great. Get this off my back that I'm no longer paying for storage of all of my stuff. And then I thought, I'm still paying storage for my daughter's stuff. And I thought, no, I'm going to get rid of that too. I'm just going to have a freeing experience and get rid of that too. And then there was this overwhelming voice of, you're not done with building your family. There's a position missing. And so I decided I would try again just a couple times, 3 times. And if I didn't have a kid, that would be fine. And I would move on. And then I got my son. So they're 8 years apart, which is significant. But we have a beautiful little family here with 2 Chihuahua mixes. And I used to think they were tiny. And then when they got their cousin Oslo dog, who's 3 pounds, mine are more than twice that. They're 7 pounds. So they seem like the big dogs in the family. And my daughter is living at home still, even though she's in university. And we couldn't be happier just having a family our own way.
So where do you live? Not specifically your address, but just generally speaking, where do you live?
I am in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. And I came here 7 years ago with my family, and I had a job here. And then I left that company. Now I own my own business. So I can work from anywhere. And this is where I choose to live and work.
Amazing.
And where do you live?
I live in Bloomington, Minnesota, which is a suburb of the Twin Cities. And you and I grew up in California, born and raised, California kids, Northern California, San Francisco area. And I left 32-ish years ago to come to school out in Minnesota, and I never left. Just fell in love with Minnesota. It's where I wanted to raise my kids, and so we stayed. You got to Montreal how?
It's a bit of a complicated story, but the surface story, which is not so surface, was that I was raising my kids in San Francisco and I wanted them to, my daughter loves to travel and she traveled her whole entire life. She came with me on work trips. And so she's been to multiple countries and she always loved to travel. And I wanted her to understand that when she got older, she could live in any place in the world. And yet she was born and raised, she went to school within the couple miles of where she was born. She went to a single building schoolhouse that went from pre-K through 12th grade. And I had this vision of her getting out of 12th grade and going to a university somewhere in California and then getting a job somewhere in California. And I wanted to give her wings in a way. So the school she was in was French school. So she was already fluent in French. And my son had just started preschool in the same French school. So his French was getting better and better. And I was looking for a job somewhere else in the world because I wanted to give them wings and I wanted to retire eventually, and that is not possible for one person to do in San Francisco. So I landed a job in Montreal, and it's a French-speaking country, so both of them could study in French and speak French. And so we moved here thinking it would be a little while and we'd see what would happen, and we absolutely loved it. Same thing, we loved it so much. So now my daughter, I sort of ripped out her roots, and now I feel like she could live anywhere in the world that she wants to live because she's conquered 2 countries.
And she's quite a traveler. She just got back from a trip today, didn't she?
She got back today from 5 days in Mexico. She went to go to a music festival down there just because she wanted to. And Amazing. She paid for it herself, just FYI. She works at a retail company part-time, and she saved enough money and paid for it herself.
So it feels like we both ended up moving. I came to Minnesota because I'm no shade to San Francisco, but the lifestyle out in California at the time that we moved was like you had to work all the time. You had to throw your whole entire self into work. And if your kids got sick, you were expected to just make it work, like sort it out, figure it out. Like, don't you have neighbors? Don't you have family? But this kind of expectation where it's like, well, my kid is sick, I need to leave and go take care of my family was not the expectation in San Francisco. When we got to Minnesota, it was much more family oriented. It was a little bit slower. And I don't mean slow, but I mean, it just wasn't a rat race, out here. And I honestly think that some of the reason why Minnesota does move a little bit slower is because in the wintertime, there are literally days where you cannot go out. Like you can't drive because it's just piles and piles of snow and they haven't even shoveled the roads yet. And so you just have to get used to a lifestyle where it's okay to take a day. It's okay to take some time off so you can go take care of your sick kids. And I really wanted to raise my kids in that environment.
I didn't realize that life would be like that. I think we both live in the snow environment right now. One thing that I noticed was when I went from San Francisco to Montreal was the pace of life. Absolutely different. We have streets that are quite narrow. It's a very old city, so some streets are quite narrow, and the trash truck takes up the entire street. And they don't scooch over if there are cars behind them. The cars will pile up behind the trash truck and just wait until that trash truck is done with the block. And that used to drive me crazy. I'm thinking, who's honking? Why aren't people honking or getting out of their cars or something? And it's just, you're going to take those 5 to 10 minutes and sit in your car and wait for the trash truck. But everybody knows that that's okay. If you're 5 to 10 minutes late to something, everyone knows you got stuck behind a trash truck or you went down a road that wasn't plowed yet. Mm-hmm. And I like that pace of life much better where everybody's in it together and nobody's rushing to get ahead of everybody else.
Absolutely. And alongside that, there's a higher priority on taking care of your family.
So I was a pioneer. Honestly, I was a pioneer in spending time with my kids in ways that after COVID, people are starting to catch on to. But I absolutely prioritize my kids all the time, even in the middle of that rat race of corporate America in San Francisco. So as an example, when my daughter was born, I was traveling for work all the time. I worked from home unless I was traveling, but I was traveling 1 to 2 nights a week, and then usually 1 week a month, 5 or 6 days per month. I was gone, and I took her with me on the flights on United Airlines, which was the airline that was the hub in San Francisco. They didn't charge for a baby on your lap under 2 years old. So for the first 2 years of her life, I took her with me on all of my work trips. I would either hire a babysitter in the hotel room, but most of the time that's what I did. I even went to several cities frequently, and I would get a babysitter that I knew in that city, and I would just drop her at that babysitter. But then I could be with her in the afternoons and the evenings. I could fly with her. So I spent a lot of time with her. I got a lot of side eye for taking my baby everywhere. And my response was, I figured it out and you didn't. I ran into one of my clients once. We had a baby actually on the same day in the same hospital. We had our babies. And I ran into her maybe 3-4 months later in an airport. We had gone to the same meeting in the same city. And she was carrying all her pump supplies, and she was kind of disgusted at having to pump in the bathroom at the airport. And I had my baby under my arm. And I thought, no, I think I did the right thing. I think my life is a little bit easier. It wasn't easy. It absolutely was not easy, but I got to spend time with my kids and be part of the corporate rat race.
Incredible.
It was a bold choice for sure.
So now you run your own business now.
I
How
do.
did that
And
come to be?
I left my corporate job. There was a reorganization, and they offered me to apply for my same job, which was actually demotion. And I said, no, I'll take the money. Thank you. And I did that. And I am now consulting to similar work that I did when I was working for people, but I work for myself. I have my own hours. I'm in my own office, and I get to select my clients, and I'm not in meetings from 8 to 5 every day, which is just lovely.
And you are home when your kid gets off of school.
I am home when he gets off of school, and he used to care. now that he's in 7th grade, he just goes to do his own stuff. They're getting more and more independent. But yes, I'm home. I can take him to an early hockey game, early hockey practice. I'm here. I don't have to tell my work I need this afternoon off. And you run your own businesses.
I do.
Your own work.
I do. So I worked in churches actually for a number of years, and my kids were allowed to come to church, and they came to all the events, and they were in Sunday school and confirmation and vacation Bible school and the choirs and all of the things. But I started to realize that I was enjoying more of my kids at my work than I was enjoying my kids at home. And it just got to be too much. It just wasn't fulfilling for me or for them anymore. So I left church life and I started my own publishing company in the churchy world. And I did that for a number of years, and then got tired of that and sold that business. Well, it was about the time that I was adopting my little guy. And so now I have shifted into a place where I am working first as his PCI, which is a personal care assistant or personal care attendant. So I get paid by the state to give him the additional cares that he requires. He's significantly disabled, but it affords us a little bit of money to be able to get him the extra help. Now, a lot of parents of kids with special needs and significant disabilities end up being their kids' PCAs. One, because PCAs are almost impossible to find these days because they don't get paid anything and there's no benefits, and it's hard work. But two, because if we were to get a PCA in to take care of the child and then go out and get a job, we would have to then also supplement those hours, and we basically would be working for just the opportunity to have someone else watch them. But also, my kid is sick a lot. And a lot of kids that have significant special needs and disabilities just are sick all the time. And so it's really hard if you have a job outside the home to be calling in sick all of the time. So I'm much happier working as his PCA, and I am also a content creator. I have a couple different platforms that I put my content up, and so those are the main things that I do with my time, and I love it. Although I would say I hated every boss I have ever had my whole entire life. They were problematic for me. They needed me to do things. They needed me to do them their way. They needed me to do them on time. And I'm just not good at that. So I have always hated every boss I've ever had. And then I started working for myself and I still hated the boss that I had because then I still had to do all the things that my boss me wanted to do them the right way and do them on time. And so, so the problem was me then and the problem is me now, but I'm still much happier in this environment.
At least you get to spend time with your kids too. I don't know anybody who could argue that you staying home with your son is absolutely the best thing for you, for him, for society. It's such a good decision and good on you for making that.
It does make it challenging. The other day I posted a video of him interrupting me through a whole entire I never even did get that video finished or posted because he was singing and talking and banging his drum and I couldn't work while he was doing that. And when he's home, I don't want to be working. I or content creating. I want to have my attention on him when he's home. So, yeah, it's
So
a
this
challenge.
interrupting is him doing what he does, and that's bringing joy to the world. So I also just started TikToking, and I did that because I'm starting a YouTube channel for my company, and I wanted to get all of the mistakes made on my personal TikTok account. So as part of that TikTok account, it's constantly reminding me, please put in a bio. And I didn't know what to say about a bio. And so I came up with a series of words, a description of who I am. So I'll go through those, and I would love to hear if you have something similar, what
Okay.
your words are. So here are my
Yeah.
words. I am mother, neuroscientist, humanist, sister, immigrant, medical survivor, friend, steadfast ally across multiple spectra, and American Canadian.
My bio is really just mother of 4 with special needs, and I learned shit. I'm still learning shit. I think that's how my bio goes. I'm never going to stop learning as long as I live. I want to be learning new things.
So maybe that's your secret to life is never stop learning shit.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out the recording technology for this because this is a new podcast for us and podcasting is new. I haven't really done a lot of podcasting. And so I'm trying to figure out the software and I'm doing my hair this morning and I had this rolling around in my head and it was like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Can't teach an old dog new tricks because it's software I don't know how to use, but I have to use it. And every time that it would roll in my head, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I was like, well, then I must not be that old of a dog because I am learning a ton of new stuff and I love it. I love it. And it's going to take me forever, but man, I got to keep my brain going.
I completely agree. I spent the last year of my life getting a graduate degree in computer science. I already have a PhD in neuroscience. So that I was done. I didn't need any more education, but I was so curious and I wanted to know, and I want to do some things with my business that involve high tech. So now I can code in Java and C++. I can write a program in Xcode. And a year ago, I wouldn't even know how to say that or how to begin such projects.
So tell me about your business.
I'll keep it brief. I think it's a whole conversation to have, but in brief, I am a consultant to the pharmaceutical and medical device industries, and I provide medical affairs solutions. So the overall vision of my company is to improve the efficiency and workings of the pharmaceutical industry and the medical device industry in order to allow them to focus more of their resources directly on patient care. So my vision. So I actually did a 4-part series on health equity the other day, and that was one of the most soul satisfying things that I do. So I don't think that I make a big difference in the world. I make a little difference here and there when I can, but I feel like that series was very satisfying and enriching, and I felt like it could actually make a difference once it hits the right audience. So it really was how practical steps we can take today to help healthcare equity in the future, and I really enjoyed that kind of thing. Hey, if you like our content, please like and subscribe and comment. It helps the algorithm and it helps us develop more material.
Thank you.
So today is about introduction and who we are. I wanted to point out a couple of similarities between us. So we have both girls and boys. We have adult children and children at the same time. We are both older moms, which is fantastic. We're both intellectual and intentional parents. So I have read about my kids' age and I love to look up things and see what other people are doing and get feedback. I really love looking at my community to help make decisions about what my kids are doing or what I do with regard to my kids. Especially check in with my sister all the time about ways to parent. What else do you see that we have in common? Oh, we both moved from California to a colder place, which is interesting. What else do you see that we have in common?
We both have a desire to leave a mark on the world in whatever way we can. In some kind of corner of our world, we want to make it better than the world we came into.
For me, I would say it's less leaving a mark on the world and more just trying to make something better.
One way that we do that is through our kids. And that's why when both of us introduced ourselves, we started with our families, not with our work.
Yes. Yes. I find great pride in that because to me, what's important about my world is my kids.
Yeah. Yeah. And the way that we raise our kids is going to have a much bigger impact on the world, the way that they then impact the world than any businesses that I start.
So I have been intentional in my parenting as to how I make decisions about interacting with them, but I give them a lot of autonomy to be who they're going to be as a person. So I have to say I'm not good at letting them make mistakes and working on that, but I am very good at giving them space to express themselves and be who they are and be a little bit off from center, which is where I've been my entire life.
Just because our kids are who they are, that they are autonomous, doesn't mean that we don't have an influence on them. And our influence is not necessarily in the choices that we made for our parenting, but I think in the way that we modeled it. I think the way we modeled healthy relationships and healthy work-life balance and all of those things, and the way that we failed to balance things properly, all of those things I think end up teaching our kids a whole lot more than the things that I thought I was teaching them. What they learned from me was a lot more about what they saw in the way that I moved through the world. And when I was younger, I didn't necessarily like how I was moving through the world, but you got to start somewhere.
I do think it's astounding though that you and I have raised our kids to be autonomous, and autonomy is not just being on your own or making decisions on your own, but being able to express who you are and be free to be who you are. We were not raised that way, and yet this became a priority for both of us to raise our kids that way. So I remember we were raised as perfect kids. So we would leave parties. When I was young, we would leave parties and our parents would say, "Oh, you guys were the best. You were just perfect. You were better than all the other kids." And that's a lot of pressure because I knew that that was not true. I was not better than the other kids. I was not perfect. I was very, very shy and never spoke. So maybe just existing without any personality at all was my way of trying to be perfect. I can't say something, otherwise, it's going to show that I'm not perfect.
That's too bad, because then you have to silence your voice.
I did for most of my life. When I was
It's
about
really sad.
18, 17, I got a job with this group of women and we went to lunch and I was brave enough to speak up and I was going to tell a joke. And one of them was eating a quarter pounder. And I said something, "Oh, if you eat a quarter pounder, you gain a half a pound." And she looked at me with this. And she said,
Oh no.
"Check your facts." And I thought, okay, that's what I get for opening my mouth. So I think
Yes.
I needed to be more selective about what to say. Oh, but this is an interesting point and something I wanted to talk with you just in general as my sister. This idea of putting yourself out there in ways, knowing that when you put it yourself out there, you're going to cross the line occasionally. And you have to be willing to cross that line and get to the cringe and get to the discomfort and get to the, "Oh, what did you just do?" Otherwise, at least in my experience, my only other option is to be quiet all the time as I was when I was a kid. And that was not a happy life. I know several people who are just incredibly charismatic. And when they walk into a room, they can get all of the eyes on them because they're speaking loud. And it's like they're giving a talk when they first walk into the room. And it looks like those people can do no wrong. They know where the line is and they're never going to cross the line. But I guarantee all of those people who come in with being able to speak fluidly and just continuously, they cross the line as much as anybody else does. And they're just willing to put up with it. And they're able to speak that way because they're willing to cross the line and they just carry it without any kind of shame. And I love that. And I'm completely right now willing to cross that line into cringe and into embarrassment rather than staying silent.
I love that. I think you're so right that you have to be willing to accept that you're going to step over. And I remember when I remember going through that phase, what you're talking about, of, you know what, every time I open my mouth, I put my foot in it, and it is just not worth it. I'm just going to not talk. I'm not going to, and I would go for months or years, even sometimes, without using my voice, because not because I didn't know what to say, because I knew for a fact that I would say something that I regretted.
Right.
It
And we
wasn't even
do.
like thought maybe there's a possibility I might cross the line. It was like, no, I know for a fact I will. But I wasn't at that time in a place where I could do that and then not be completely crushed under the shame of it.
Right. That's what it is. It's the shame of crossing that line. If we could throw off that shame, and I feel like I have, maybe it's just aging or maybe it's development and growth, but being able to shake off that shame and say, oh, that was dumb, or that sounded silly, or that was cringe, and then say, but who cares? I'm not going to judge myself for it. And if other people do, I really, that's not an important person to me. So
No, and
that's shame.
in order to get over that shame, I really had to learn how to treat myself the way that I would treat my best friend or my sister or my kids. And I had to really internalize that I was worth that kind of attention. It's an effort to move past the place of self-loathing and that negative self-talk and all of those things. Not to say that it's completely gone, but once I was willing to give myself the same grace that I gave other people, that was the time when I started to unbury myself under all of that shame. Because that's all shame is carrying the weight of something that you didn't really actually deserve or own or do, but you carry it as if you did.
You said something very profound there, and that is treating yourself like you would treat your friend or your sister. And I know that there's been a difference in my life. You and I started talking regularly 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, maybe more than that. Time's going so fast right now,
Mm-hmm.
but we started
More.
talking regularly not that long ago relative to our lives. And I know my life is different because if I'm struggling with something or I'm putting shame on myself and I can see through the shame that it's not that appropriate, I would say, okay, what would my sister say to me right now? And if I struggle with that, I would just call you and say, what do you say about this? And you'd say exactly what I thought you'd say. And I felt better about it. And being able to give myself the grace that I know that you give me, and hopefully you give yourself the grace that you know I give you.
Yes.
I think it makes a difference to me.
That's super well spoken. And I hope that everybody has a person like that where they can just
Or
like be completely like vulnerable and just like lay it all out there and know that you're not going to get judged for it.
I don't think everybody has something like that, someone like that in their lives. And I think there are mentally healthy people who don't have someone like that in their lives, but we have a podcast to do that.
Yay! That's what we're here for.
Yes.
That's what I want to do. Here's one of the other reasons why we came around to this kind of a format. So my kids are young adults, and from the time they were like middle school, high school age, up until even today, they've always had a lot of friends around them. And I always made a point to get to know my kids' friends. Um, okay, a little secret. I never really wanted to know my kids' friends' parents because I will find my friends in my own way. But if they're important to my kids, then they're important to me. So I would get to know the kids, and every once in a while, some kid would just like emerge from the basement where they all hung out and just sit down with me and just start talking and telling me things about their lives and things that they were struggling with. And most of the time, it wasn't like life shattering things that they were dealing with. It was age appropriate things that they were dealing with. And so I would just give them a different perspective. Um, and sometimes I would say even things like, you just told me you don't know what to do, but it sounds to me like you know exactly what to do. And even just saying that would sometimes just open up the whole world to them. And and then they would go away just feeling like I had just imparted like the wisdom of the Dalai Lama on them. And it really was just like, well, that's because I've been to therapy for so many years and I've done the work. And I now have enough distance from childhood to adulthood to I feel like those years give you space to breathe, like it gives your soul like a little bit of time to sort of marinate and settle into what your soul needs to be. And in those early years, it's just like a chaos all the time. But now that I'm a little bit older, I just feel like, okay, I can learn the things, I can internalize them, I can practice some new tools, and not everything is like a life or death situation at this point. So I think sometimes even just being able to bring that to those kids, just like you're this is not the end of all things. This is just
Right.
a blip. It's a thing and you're going to learn from it and that'll be a good thing.
But this is one of your gifts is reflection of other people. So those kids, you say they came to you and they had doubts about the decision they were going to make or the reaction they were going to have. And they would speak it out loud to you and you would counsel them and help them listen to themselves because they're saying it out loud to you. And your ability to reflect back to them what they knew in their heart but couldn't really
Mhm.
internalize until they said it out loud to you. I think that's a huge gift.
Thank you. And I think that's you just said it right there. It's things that they already knew. It's just sometimes you need someone else to be able to kind of pull it out of you. And we talked about this before that one of the other reasons I really want to do a podcast like this is because when I was struggling so much for so many years, what got me through to the place where I feel I am today, which is a fairly healthy place, uh, was listening to the voices of other people and listening to their stories. And sometimes they didn't even have to lecture at me, just hearing
No.
their stories sometimes was like, oh my God, that's the same story that I'm existing. And I thought I was the only one. And I didn't know that I could trust my gut to answer this for myself. And so sometimes it's just a matter of permission and gently encouraging and coaxing what they already know out of them.
So you and I being lifelong learners, I've had the experience many times in my life, probably more frequently as I got older because I'm very interested in growing as a person, where I would think something for 50 years and then something would happen or I'd hear someone else say something and I would go, "Oh, all of a sudden this I okay. Now I see that." And I think that's what we can do on this podcast too is to just articulate things that everybody may sense, but just to have it said out loud, maybe in a moment that's important to that person, and hopefully will reach people on their time frame, could potentially help them see this truth that will change things
Yeah.
in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many things that I wish that I had allowed myself to learn younger. I think I resisted learning some of those things because being uncomfortable familiar sometimes feels better than being discomforted by the unknown. Um, and now I'm starting to realize that if my gut is screaming at me, I don't have to take years and decades to listen to it anymore.
I have two observations. And
Okay.
I observe all of these things with just great admiration and love for you. So first your comment that sometimes it's easier to be in the familiar than the unfamiliar, I think most times. And it's so easy to not change, even if we think change would be better for us. Even if we're in a miserable
Mhm.
situation, change is almost always harder, harder. And then the second thing, I'm perceiving from you that perhaps you're blaming yourself in some little way for not having learned these lessons earlier. And I think we learn the lessons when we're ready, and that's just it. There's no possible way for us to have learned it earlier because we couldn't have. So I'd like to take a
Yeah.
little bit of the burden off of your shoulders on that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's fair. I wish it could have gone differently. I wish I could have learned them sooner. But acknowledging that helps me to move through the rest of my life and not dragging my feet when I know that my soul is telling me I'm heading in the wrong direction or I'm heading in the right direction.
So that's fair. And I think as we get older, at least for me, it's easier to make that jump without worrying so much about what's next, even if it's scary. I don't like regrets and I don't like the word should. And of course I regret things and of course I use the word should, but when I hear those immediately my ears perk up and I say, let's try to rephrase that or reposition that because I don't like those two things.
Well, I'll tell you, I used to get really, really upset when people would say, "Oh, that's disappointing." I could not stand the idea that someone was disappointed. And I started to realize that owning that word gives me power to move through it instead of run from it. And there's so much embarrassment and shame about experiencing something that's just disappointing. It's disappointing. I was disappointed in that. So I feel like that same thing with regret. Like, I don't think it's healthy to live with just buried under regret. But for me to be able to say, boy, that I wish I could have done that differently, and to be able to claim that as what it is, just helps me to then move through life not doing that anymore.
Yes, that's the key is you look back on your regret, whatever your regret is, and you learn from it and do something different next time. So I
Yeah,
suppose the only true regret is an irreversible thing that's been done. So even that one can
sure.
learn from it, but I don't like the idea of regret because then you're removing yourself from the responsibility and the gift of moving on and learning and growing. So I would love to hear from a community of women, of people, I suppose, what other words are triggering like that in a way that if the thought were repositioned, it would actually be a growth mindset instead of something holding us back. So we've got, I'm disappointed, or I regret it. You should do this.
I did want to ask one more question as we're wrapping up. In 10 words or less, what is the secret to life?
It is looking for, seeking, keeping eyes open for those moments of joy and jumping from one moment of joy to the next moment of joy, because all of that can happen even when the background is sucky and awful and dangerous. If we really keep our eyes open for those moments of joy, little, big, infinitesimally small, if we jump from those moments of joy to moments of joy, I think we can keep going and be relatively joyful. It was more than 10 words, but
That's okay.
do you have an answer as well?
I do. And I think mine is a little bit different from yours. It's adjacent. It's like parallel adjacent. So I think what you essentially were talking about is being present, being mindful, being present, and acknowledging and being aware of those moments of joy. For me, the awareness and presence includes the moments that aren't as awesome as joy. And so I find that even if I'm experiencing something rather unpleasant, if I'm present in it and moving through it, it is a better experience for me than if I am avoiding it and just trying to stay away at all costs. So, I mean, our adjacence is, I think that we both recognize that the secret to happiness and joy is being present.
Completely agree. And I do think we're saying virtually the same thing. And my jumping from moments of joy in no way means that we skip over everything else that's going on. It's just
Yeah.
a way to be present for those moments of joy and not let them pass us by and not say no to them when their opportunities come to us. All the other
And,
stuff, we have to deal with it. We have to live with all the other stuff. We have to deal with it. We have to
yeah.
work through it. And on top of that, we have these moments of joy.
And what I think you said was too is to bringing in awareness to it. And I think when you say jumping joy to joy, I think that's what you're really talking about is having an awareness that I am really happy in this moment, or I have this deep sense of contentment in this moment, and to acknowledge it so that 5 days from now, or 5 months from now, or 5 minutes from now, when I'm not experiencing that same joy, I can go back and be like, okay, that's what that felt like. I know that I can have that again. This little discomfort is not going to last forever. Because for me, that was one of the mind cycles that I used to get into. That kind of like death spiral that felt like whatever I was feeling in that moment that was uncomfortable or unpleasant was going to last forever. And I
Yeah.
really truly believed it. It was like I was never ever going to experience something like happiness because I couldn't remember what the happiness felt like because I didn't mark them and become aware of them in that moment. When I started doing what you're talking about, which is marking those moments of joy, then I could get through the rest of it a lot easier because I know that joy is coming right around the bend.
It's a great point, and to be able to remember that that's coming, I think that's a huge gift. I think there's also a difficulty that maybe women have in looking at some of these potential moments of joy as obligations and things that they just have to work harder to do, especially when your kids are what 0 to 20 years old. I don't know. As an example, like a couple years ago, I brought my son to a block from our house in this little corner park. There was a Santa set up with a sled and some other, and I easily could have been okay, I've got to put my boots on. I got to get his boots on, get his hat on. We got to walk all the way down there. It's freezing cold. I don't know who we're going to run into. And I don't feel like talking to anybody. And we're going to have to do, it could have been one more thing on my list of things we have to do. And yet when we left the house, we were joyful and happy to be outside, and we were together, and it was fresh air, and we saw Santa Claus, and we got some hot cocoa, and we got to sit by the fire. And by looking at it as what it was a moment of joy instead of yet another obligation I have to check off of my to-do list, it really changed everything for me in those recognizing when joy was present. Hey, Ava, do you like your mom's content?
I do. Do you like it, Karen?
I really do. I like my mom's content.
It's amazing.
Hey, I can subscribe, please.
Like and subscribe.